Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Joseph James Show. I'm Joseph James, your host. Week after week, we come to you with valuable interviews from the world's most interesting and successful people. Our mission is to build a community of highly skilled and highly intelligent people that learn and work with each other for the betterment of one another. In this week's episode, we have a special guest, Elizabeth Davis, aka Coach Kitty. She is from Detroit, Michigan. She now resides in Southern Florida and has a story and business that you need to know about. And I'm going to introduce her by reading a bio before we actually meet her. So this again is Elizabeth Davis, Coach Kitty's bio. She grew up in Detroit, Michigan, spent a few formative adult years in Dallas, Texas, and has enjoyed living in South Florida for the past 13 years. After a 20-year hiatus from college, at 40, she returned to earn a bachelor's degree in organizational management and has over 30 years experience in nonprofit, grassroots, community organizing, personal growth, and public health. She also has a lifetime of experience learning how to live with undiagnosed ADHD and mental health issues, and has healed from decades of being surrounded by people with unaddressed neurodiversity, mental health issues, and substance use disorder. Coach Kitty is passionate about helping to make the healing journey as easy as possible for her clients with love, compassion, and humor. Now, before I move on any further, I just want to let the audience know we're going to have 3 parts to this interview. Kitty's going to tell us about how it was like growing up, her early years, and, different experiences, I guess she had, like we all have, to form our teenage and adult years. And after that, then we'll go into her early business experiences and what she did, her profession, what she liked, what she didn't like. And finally, the bulk of the interview is centered around her current business, what she does, and how she helps others. So here we go. Kitty, how are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. I want to just say thanks for joining us today on the Joseph James podcast. We're honored to have you. So let's begin the interview.
Sure.
The floor is yours. Tell us a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, and favorite child memory, whatever comes to mind.
Sure. So I grew up in a small little suburb of Detroit called Oak Park, Michigan, and I was there with my folks, and my sister came along much later when I was 16. So there's a big age gap, but we're very close. And but before we moved there, my mom and I lived in Detroit. This is my adoptive dad, and we moved. So the interesting piece about that is that it was the early 70s, and my mom was a hippie and going to college and stuff. So we lived, when I was really tiny, we lived in a commune, and then we ended up living in this big house. And she's an artist and a therapist. So we ended up living in this big house with there were a lot of roommates, and there was a lot of she had a monthly potluck, and there were a lot of people, and it was wonderful. And it occurred to me much later on in my life that's where I got that sense of wanting to build community, and how that's why that's important. It just feels so good. It's so nice, to have all that love around you, and fun and good food and all that good stuff. So it started from a very young age. So okay. Yeah, the move out to the suburbs was a little, I realized just recently how traumatizing that was for me as a child.
Sure, you got to start all over, meet new friends, new school.
It wasn't even that, it was the culture shock. right? It was the culture shock of going from this big, broad life with lots of people to a very small life with a smaller house. And it just was it was isolating. And it's just kind of interesting how, we just don't pay attention to, my parents did the best they could, no question. But, looking back, it's like, oh, there's something to process there for a kid to say, hey, this is really different, and to give that space. So that's what a lot of what I do now is helping to give people space to express themselves and feel their feelings, figure out what to do with all that stuff. So, but anyway, it started really early.
Well, as a mindset coach, I've learned not too long ago, I kind of knew it, but it was brought to the forefront of what mindset is about. And by the age of 7, everything you've inhaled from all the people around you becomes part of who you are, your beliefs, your values, everything is embedded in your subconscious mind, and you take that with you throughout your life. Now, if things are holding you back, there's some kind of trauma that's still there that wasn't worked with, it's going to help you form decisions. And not a lot of times they're not good decisions, because your subconscious will prevent you from, say, for instance, your parent told you you have, you're not going to amount to anything. Just children should be seen and not heard. And, all of those things, they go into your subconscious mind. So then when you're trying to make an impression, say for a job, and you want to go on an interview, you have low self-esteem, you're doubting yourself, the inner voice is saying you're not going to get this job. It just carries you. And that's where the mindset part comes in. So now what I was going to ask you is, I'm not going to say you had trauma, but what is the biggest thing that stands out for you that started forming who you are by the age of 7 to 10, say?
So trauma is big T and little t trauma, right? When we talk about that on the ACEs scale, divorce is trauma, housing instability is trauma, unaddressed mental health issues. All those things they're not the acute trauma of witnessing or secondary trauma of inhaling, like you said, that's a good word, for watching something horrific happen. These are insidious things that happen like all along the way. And to your example about hearing you're not going to amount to anything, for example, and this goes to speak to being formative, is that sometimes it's not even that direct, right? It's, in my case, it wasn't that direct. In my case, the overt language was, you can do anything. You can succeed at anything. It was the covert language of the action of, those who raised me, that was the negative impact, right? So it wasn't an overt thing as far as you can't do this. It was the lack of support for the things I wanted to do that would help me develop. And it was based on, oh, well, you're just going to quit. Oh, this is just throwing money over something you're not even going to, stick with, or, that kind of thing. That was a huge message. And so that really formed me in those years that you're talking about as far as a negative impact, right? You're not worth the time. It's not valuable just to play with things and just to try things out. If you don't stick with it, then you're worthless, and that it's not worth trying. And, that was definitely the messaging. And that informs what I do now, because, and still, a part of that healing journey of, playfulness and taking the time to do things, just to do them, to enjoy them, to be in the moment. That if you rent a violin for a semester and learn something about how to play, that's not a loss, right? That's a great, right? And if you don't turn out to be a virtuoso, that's okay.
Right. Music's a good thing, no matter, you try it. You try it.
Yeah, you had a good time trying it. You were with your friends doing it because it was all part of a class thing, right? So that was the other thing, is that not supporting things like that was isolating. It was very isolating. And so I learned from a very early age, I leaned toward the arts anyway. And so being in choir and being in drama didn't cost anything.
Right.
There were community programs, and that was really well funded from my school system. So, and that brought those same things. It was creative, it was expressive, very supportive environment. You know, a bunch of kids who all fit in together because we don't fit in, you know, and later on, of course, some of us becoming queer kids. So, you know, and having that kind of space. So all those things from a very early age, I was involved in all of that very young, in choir and music, and carried it out through my high school and into college.
Well, what I hear, money is a big issue because it all seemed to stem around everything you wanted to do. She let you do, or he, whoever was raising you, just decided, if it doesn't cost me anything, go ahead, go do it. But if it's going to cost, let's look at this a minute. Maybe you don't really want, they'll try to talk you out of it, because I've experienced a similar issue with my upbringing. The other thing is, the happy part was when you started talking about the drama and the friends and all that, you seem to be in a better place. You lit up a little.
Yeah, for
with
sure.
excitement, because that was your go-to place for getting away from the day-to-day, you know, parental discipline or whatever they were going to throw you away. Anyway, you have any siblings or anything else you want to share about the childhood before we move into?
Yeah, my sister, like I said, she's 16 years younger than me, and we have a we're a pretty close relationship, and yeah, I don't get to see her enough or her kids enough, so yeah.
So a shout out to your sister.
Yep, absolutely.
What's her name?
Samantha, and Finn and Lily are my niece and nephew.
Hi. Don't forget to look for us coming soon on YouTube.
Yeah, they're a delight. Both of them, all of them are a delight. And
now, okay, I'm sorry.
No,
Now we're going to get into, you graduated high school. I don't know if you started college, but you obviously were probably working at this point in time. So tell me some of those working experiences. How did that look?
Well, actually, I did go to college right out of high school. It was, I somehow miraculously enrolled and secured financial aid without any support or assistance from my family. It kind of got me in trouble because without knowing how loans worked, I got a payment book and I was like, what's happening? I don't understand this.
You're not alone. A lot of college kids do that.
Yeah. So it was funny because later on, one of my jobs, much later on when I moved to Florida, was as a financial aid advisor. So I was, you know, and that also sort of was a coaching role. I took that on as a coaching role because I wanted to make sure that the people, if you're signing away for thousands of dollars that you owe, you should know what interest is. You should really be clear on those expectations, right? And what your options are and how much you take and all that kind of stuff. So it was really, that was interesting. I made it to college and I went for special ed. I had done some programs when I was in middle school and high school working with in special ed. And long story short, I found out that the academic environment really wasn't for me as far as going into schooling. And I later on realized that was a good choice because school administration is really a tough thing to deal with, especially somebody with an entrepreneurial spirit and neurodiversity. It's really hard to fit into that mold. So I thought, well, if I'm not going into special ed, I should learn a skill. And so that's when I left college and I started doing community organizing, door-to-door fundraising. I worked for Greenpeace for a while. And the skill that I decided to learn was grassroots community organizing. I should have chosen something much more lucrative, but here we are. It was very, very valuable. And what I realized out of that job was that, because it was all about leadership, community leadership development. We weren't at the forefront. We were developing people to take back their own neighborhoods, right, with community and things like that. So learning about social justice issues, I'd always been involved in that because of my folks, but because of my mom and my grandma. But understanding how all of this applies, right? Understanding really early on how our systems are very racist and misogynist and things like that, and being able to do community organizing work was offering a path of empowerment for people in underserved communities. And
Absolutely.
in all of that work, that was the most exciting thing, was watching the transformation of the community leaders, because it just doesn't happen in a conference room. It also happens at home, right? And so that was the best part of that experience, that work experience.
So you did that for how long?
All of that I did for quite a while. I did a bunch of restaurant work while I worked, in and out of service of that, and found that the back of the house was my thing. Prep cooking. I do love to cook, and that energy has ebbed and flowed recently too, with my own feelings of care and self-care. It's been a really interesting look at my relationship with food and cooking. But I do cook, and I think that is a love language. I was raised in a Jewish culture, so food is a love language, and so that kind of informed the next step. I worked in nonprofit for a while too, and then opened a coffee house, and that was amazing.
I can relate to a few of the things you're talking about, because when I was trying to get back on my feet, and trying to recover from going through a program for alcoholism, I worked in restaurants. I never had a problem finding a job. Whenever I used to hear people say they can't, if you want to find a job, you can. But what I do recommend is try to find a job that you can take with you on the road. Something that many states will have that position waiting for you. I was a bill collector, then I was a financial advisor after I found out the terrible situations people can be in money-wise. I volunteered for AmeriCorps, and that's a one-year program, and was introduced to working with people with disabilities. I enjoyed that so much that after I finished my stint, it's a one-year commitment for AmeriCorps, I decided to work with a company in California working with people with disabilities, and that was a joy. I enjoyed that a lot. And so we've gotten you up until what do you find, after working and getting out into the real world? What are some of your personal strengths that you have, without a doubt, personal strengths?
Good communicator, good organizer, as far as being able to put things together. One of my huge strengths is being able to see things from a lot of different perspectives without judgment. Being able to see the big picture and the little picture and how that fits in with planning, things like that. I see things in ways that a lot of people don't.
Right. So you know how to delegate the work. Is that a way of putting it?
And yes, I can delegate work. It's nice.
Sure, you find out who's good at what and you place them in those positions. I did that. I've been a manager a couple of times, and it's very good to know your employees and know what their pluses and minuses are, so you can put them in the right, and everything runs a lot smoother.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've had a lot of challenges, because this question I was going to say, what were some of your biggest challenges you faced along the way there?
So I would have to say that one of the biggest challenges was the undiagnosed ADHD. Another one is that I live with a low-grade functional depression and some leanings toward anxiety, and have dealt with those at different levels throughout my life. I've been lucky that it hasn't been severe for severe periods. It's been severe enough for me to have a really good understanding of what that feels like. And man, I just people who live with that all the time, I have a lot of compassion for. And the same, So I've been through like, okay, what works for me around dealing with that, and making those part of like my self-care everyday life. Like I said, the undiagnosed ADHD, that was a huge challenge throughout school. I thought I grew up thinking I was dumb, and I stayed in relationships because with dyscalculia and switching numbers back and forth, I was really afraid that I would end up in a tragic and traumatic financial situation without a home. So by messing things up. So I stayed in relationships for the security of having somebody manage funds that I always had a roof over my head. So it wasn't until much later. So that was a series of relationships that reinforced, the dysfunctional parts of what I grew up in. And so I grew up in what I call just regular sort of, cultural dysfunction that hits everybody, right? And I had all of my basic needs met, but my wants and desires not so much. And so, understanding that that I do deserve good things, and that we all do. Everybody does. Just by living and breathing, we have our value, right? And to be able to reinforce that. So it's not even a matter of being deserving. Everybody is all deserving, right? We take that, that can become a value. And so then it's a lot easier to step into that when you're like, oh yeah, this is how it's supposed to be. So the big challenge was growing up in that environment with somebody who I have a parent who then was misusing alcohol and then stopped. And you are probably familiar with the term dry drunk, right? But I have come up with a new terminology to make it broader, and also I think a little bit more trauma informed. Is I call it Band-Aid sobriety.
Right, and the Band-Aid can fall off any minute.
Right, it's only holding things together. You're putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, like they say,
Very
right?
delicately. Yes.
So, that can happen with people who aren't treated for mental health issues. And these challenges have informed that I understand that these are co-occurring issues, and they're chicken and egg. Mental health issues and substance use issues. We don't really need to understand which came first, right? And we treat everybody as a whole person, offering what they need. So those were the challenges I grew up with, the general cultural dysfunction of not knowing what to do with feelings and our own feelings and others' feelings and how that impacts us. That was huge. The challenge of then remaining in relationships that were unhealthy for survival, mental and physical survival, and reenacting those scenes and those stories over and over again because of the value also of being in a partnership that I was raised with, that you stick with a partner no matter what, and you try and try and try and try. So that was also a challenge that I went through all the way through adulthood, was holding on for all.
Did you seek help for your depression and anxiety issues?
I didn't until much later. I didn't really know that's what was happening. I really had no idea.
You thought it was the norm. You kind of thought, yeah.
And I was a pretty happy person with a pretty good outlook, so I just kind of trucked along.
Right.
I felt I led a pretty charmed life after all, because I don't know how I'm alive today. I don't know how I'm like.
Because you have work to do. You have work to do. You need to serve others and pull them along and show them you can do it.
So
I had the same problem. I got sober. When I got sober, everybody was telling me life is going to be wonderful. You're not drinking anymore. Everything's you're going to start making a lot of money, and all the good things in life are going to come to you. Well, guess what? I never was depressed prior to that, but after I got sober, I went into a deep depression, high anxiety, started doing medications, sought out therapy. I ended up with a psychoanalyst for 2 years. And I'm glad I did, because when you're doing it and you have any kind of addiction, you're trying to blot out something you don't want to think about in your life. And so if you stop that addiction, you have a hole inside you that needs to be filled. You can fill it with whatever you like. For me, the hole stayed there until I started doing the psychoanalysis and reviewing why was I drinking for all those years? What was I trying to hide? And little by little, psychoanalysts, I don't know if you're familiar with, it's a little different than regular therapy. And they don't say anything. You come in the room, they sit there, they nod there occasionally. And it does work. You know why? Because after you come in and you start talking about your day, 3 weeks in a row, it gets boring. So you start digging down deeper and deeper and deeper. And then finally, peeling that onion, you get to the core of what the real issue is. And when I was close to the core, I started calling in, oh, I don't think I need any more therapy. I'm done. He's like, get your ass in here. You're not done. You're almost done, but now, you know, this is what it's all been leading up to.
Yeah.
And I have to say it worked. And so after that, then I went to back to college in my 40s. I did behavioral science and got a degree in that. And a lot of it is about mindset. So after that, I just started practicing mindset. And sometimes I charged, sometimes I didn't. I was always there to help somebody. Because if you have it, it's a sin not to give it away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because so I could relate to all that. I could relate to being in those situations where what am I going to do with myself if I leave him, if I leave her, whoever's supporting you, you think you're less than to get out there and do this on your own. And always need a support group of some kind around you, no matter what. That's so vitally important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you have your own business now? How is this working?
I do. It's a nonprofit.
Okay.
Because there's a couple of different pillars of the business. I consider myself a social entrepreneur. I have very much an entrepreneurial spirit and outlook, and the social part of it is to be able to use that in service. And so I come from the understanding that you know, everybody who wants care should get care, and that's important. So to your point, I always have slots available that are pay what you can, or you know, I always have time for people that need help, you know, in some way, even with money as an issue. I don't want that to ever be a barrier to somebody who is willing to do the work, right?
That's wonderful.
So we figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, very commendable.
Thank you. But that and that's part of why I set up as a nonprofit, so I can fundraise. So I have that pay it forward program, so people can donate, so that others can have the services they need, and I can still like eat and keep a roof over my head. So that's kind of the model. That's part of the model that I have for that. It also allows me to get grants to fund the other part of the work, which is the workplace work that I do. So I do individual work and I do workplace work.
Is there a name? Does the business have a name?
Moving Forward Wellness. Yeah, movingforwardwellness.org.
Very nice, very nice. And you have people working for you?
Not exactly. I have a lot of collaborations. I do have one person who I call my right arm, my chief cook and bottle washer, and they really help me out a lot. They volunteer because of where we're at, and they are, you know, I'm fortunate that they have the time and they're able to do that. And it's great. It's great for them. They can still, you know, help out when they can, given their own, you know, situation, and it's a good working relationship, you know, right now. And I do look to having other programs, an art program, and a couple of other things where, you know, I absolutely want to hire people. And so that's also part of the benefit of being a nonprofit, is that I can look for grants for those positions and be able to fund their position and hire people. And Then with, especially with the coaching, that model is that I can do workplace coaching, and not for nonprofits and community clinics. And then then it's paid for, right?
Mhm.
Then it's funded, and that removes a barrier to those that are always for funding. That removes a barrier. So what I do is trauma-informed TLBGQ plus proficient wellness coaching. And the idea is taking care of the people in service, so that ultimately will prevent sanctuary trauma. Because the LGBTQ community, and what I call the TLBGQ plus community, already walking through the door of an agency or seeking medical care is 40% more likely to experience discrimination.
Mhm.
So it's a huge part of the community that I live in. It's a huge part of the community that I serve, because I don't want my people, our people, going to seek medical, physical and mental health care and social services and be traumatized in that process. And I don't want the people who work for those organizations to have workplace trauma and burnout because they're serving, and that they think that's part of serving, and it's not. It doesn't have to be.
So what services do you offer when say I'm over there?
So I have a one-on-one training for trauma-informed care, trauma-informed wellness in the workplace. And so it's a dual training about recognizing as a caregiver, as a professional caregiver, a provider, recognizing what's going on for you, being able to prevent burnout, and also having a broader understanding, a trauma-informed approach to service. And a trauma-informed approach it's a SAMHSA definition. So our substance abuse mental health agency, the federal arm, or the federal agency that is our mental health arm, has codified a term. The trauma-informed is understanding that we've all experienced trauma, and then there's a model of how to engage with people that have gone through those things. It's empowerment and collaboration, basically human, like respect for that human, that they know themselves better than you know them, and you're there to bring that out. You're there to work together with them to make those things happen. So that's the main piece of that trauma-informed model. What I add to that is understanding what trauma response can look like, especially in a provider setting. So somebody who doesn't show up, somebody who's late, your example of your therapist, you were gonna, back out because you're getting to that place. He understood that that was a response of what you were going through, right? And pushed you to come in. So what we want to do is create an atmosphere where, if somebody comes in and they've missed 4 appointments in a row, right? A lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, well, nice to finally see you. Or, you know how inconvenient that is when you don't show for appointments. What they don't understand is that person could be suffering from a myriad of things: depression, anxiety. If they have to take public transportation, there's lots of anxiety and barriers around that. So we want to get people, like you say, in the mindset and the framework of being welcoming. If somebody's missed 4 appointments, you say, we are so happy to see you. And if there's something we can do to make it easier for you to come in, please, let's talk about that, or let's, let us know. And so we can do this at every single level of engagement as somebody goes through their clinic experience or their social service experience, right? So everybody is a provider who faces a patient or a client.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Have you ever, or do you have any kind of group setting where you can, pass out a lot of this good information with a group, and maybe they can ask questions, and at the same time, you're helping a lot more people. So that's what was coming into my mind as you were speaking about this.
I appreciate that. And yeah, so part of what I do is the training and coaching. And as I let people know what services are available, I really impress that there's coaching available. It's great if you can do a training and a lunch and learn in an hour and a half. If your schedule allows me to, have 2 hours, it's like a gold mine, right?
Mhm.
And that's limited. And you hit the nail on the head. That ongoing space for people to be able to talk about their own wellness and how that impacts client services. The safe space to talk about when their client triggers them, or when they don't understand something about their gender presentation or their expression, it doesn't mesh with their own values, it doesn't mesh with what they know about that population, things like that. So you're 100% right that that is really necessary for providers to have space to talk about that. And so that's also when I work with people one-on-one. So yeah, as I grow, as I grow my audience of providers, I can absolutely offer those things outside of a workplace. I'd love to do
Well,
that.
the reason I brought it up is because people with disabilities have these day programs where they can go and meet, and they have and I just thought, if you get like-minded people all together, they can all ask each other questions and learn even more. You'll be the coach, but they can interact with the people on their own level and feel safe, like you say. Because when I was in Minnesota, they had this, which I thought was wonderful. I never heard of it before, and I'm from New York, and I thought I heard of it everything. But they had dances for people with disabilities, and I had a client that I would take there. They'd have it once a week, and they just lit up like anything and let themselves go. And there was no barriers, nobody bothering them, looking at them. They would just get on that dance floor, and for 2 or 3 hours, however long it lasted, it was beautiful. So they were all amongst each other, and they all knew each other. They made friends. So I always think of things in a group fashion, because you could help one, but it's one at a time. Certain things need to be one-on-one, but then there are other things that a group may help even more than one person.
Absolutely. And then, as you say, it has a ripple effect. So, and that's part of that model for me of working with the community clinic and nonprofit. You're helping the people working there. You're in turn helping folks who are clients, and that ripples out into the community, right? All good energy and knowing that they're safe places to come for care. That's hugely important to building a sustainable community. Safety is a part of that trauma. One of those 6 trauma-informed pieces is safety. Absolutely. So yeah, creating those safe spaces and groups, absolutely a good idea for sure.
I was going to ask you what your mission to start the company is, but I think you pretty much covered it.
Yeah.
Okay, I could ask you this one.
Sure.
What's the most important lesson you've learned over your career?
Caller.
Pardon me.
I've learned a lot, continue to learn. I would have to say it's twofold, because I'm a Gemini, I can never land on just one thing. So I would say that one is that healing is possible. We don't know how much we can do, but we know that it's possible. So for wherever you're starting, wherever you're at, there's healing that's available to you with the right resources and the right mindset and the right support, right? And the other thing is, it's not about you and it's not about you. And what I mean by that is, especially in dealing with folks with, like I said, untreated mental health disorders, or even in the process of being treated for that and substance use, people take it very personally that their person in question will not treatment because they love them. Oh, if they loved me, they would do these things. Well, it's not about you. And it's a hard thing to understand that you are collateral damage, right? It's not healthy to try to improve for other people anyway, right? So that's a really important lesson to learn. And there's so much to that as far as owning your feelings and seeing things objectively, allowing other people to own their own stuff, not getting in the middle of that. That all, like, it's not about you and it's not about you. So yeah, we wish that love could do those things and that care and could do those things, but it doesn't. It doesn't.
No, you have to be in the right space.
Yeah, you have to do it. Yeah, you really do. And I don't believe that, you have to love yourself first or you can't love anybody else. I don't think that's true. It's not been my experience. But we certainly have barriers to feeling and expressing love in healthy ways when we don't love ourselves.
Right.
Right. And I totally push back on the idea that you can't experience love if you don't love yourself. We just usually in that regard have not had healthy experiences with loving ourselves and others. So, you know, that is a huge part of what I do is, and I actually kind of just thought about this recently, is helping people to really genuinely love themselves unconditionally.
You know what, a good test, it just came to my mind.
Hmm.
A good test to see if you really love yourself or even
Mhm.
like yourself
Mhm.
is to spend time alone
Mhm.
and enjoy it.
Mhm.
A lot
Yeah.
of people can't do that. A
Oh
lot of
yeah.
people have to be on their phone, socializing on their phone, or have to have a human body next to them to feel important or to
Mhm.
feel like somebody wants them or needs them. So
Absolutely.
part about you do need, to some extent, if you really want to dig down, I personally think you need to learn how to love yourself, because if you have
Sure.
some of those
Yeah.
negative thoughts in your head when you're helping a client, they're going to come up and they're going to
Absolutely.
influence the interaction you're having with the person. So if
Absolutely.
you're not, I can't say you're going to be totally healed, because every day there's a new
Uh-oh, we froze.
thing that you got to work on. I mean, it was
Mhm.
in for a second there. You got to look. Just affirmations and all
Mhm.
those things. We have to, as advisors, as coaches, as counselors, or whatever field we're in, we need to bring our joyful selves to the table, because so they can see what it looks like, because we're guiding them, right?
Mhm.
And if they're so depressed and they can't smile, then that used to be my goal before I really even got into this, was to always make somebody smile that looks sad.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that from my perspective, I say come to it as your authentic self, because to be, and that's what I love about, I was a peer specialist in my county's large behavioral, like the largest behavioral health nonprofit. I was very honored to do that work and to learn what a peer perspective really is, how to share in those moments, that balance, right? The difficulty and the overcoming, as you said earlier, about showing that there's hope, right? Demonstrating hope.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so, yes, to I like to, to making people laugh. That's why that's why I say I bring humor, right? Because I usually use like a metaphor that will make someone laugh. And,
Mhm.
and I'll say something, but like I said, I read the room. So, and connect with people over a sense of humor about things, if they're, if they feel like, because we carry everything so heavily, right? So there is that thing about, I'm not one of those good vibes only people either, because that totally discounts a huge amount of experiences, right?
Sure,
So
sure.
yeah, so the way I frame it is, we don't live there. We experience it, we feel it, we figure out what we need to do with it, but we don't make decisions from that place,
No.
right? We don't live there. It's not good.
Well, something I learned along the way about life and interacting with other people, any people, is how to get on their level.
Mhm.
It's kind of like you wear different hats along the way, but you'll meet somebody that's talks in a certain way and he comes from a certain status, or she, is just a regular street kid or whatever. I learn how to adapt to their level so I can communicate on their level and reach them, because if you act the same all the time with everybody, there's so much diversity out there
Mhm.
that you need to be able to like I said, put on a different hat.
Yeah, I definitely I refer to that as meeting people where they're at, right? Accepting them as a
Sure,
whole person.
that's absolutely
Yeah,
correct. Yes.
yeah, accepting them as a whole person and understanding, that, the way that they communicate is let's figure that out. Let's make sure we're both meaning the same things when we talk, and we ask you a question to clarify if I don't understand. And that is absolutely part of a trauma-informed approach, is to meet people where they're at.
Well, you're working with people, I'm sure a lot of them probably go for, if they get a sliding scale in Florida, for their mental health issues, because I hear this enough. What's the difference between a therapist and a mindset coach? And we look to the future as a coach, and therapists look to the past to see what got you to where you are right now, so we can heal that. But what I was going to say about being a coach is you just talk to regular people who are, my specialty is, we start out with the stress, people that are overstressed, overwhelmed, peel that off. And then it usually goes down to mindset. There's something underlying their relationships, their finances, something that's holding them back and stressing them out. And they can't seem to move from where they are from last year, because now we're coming to the end of another year, and we're going to say, so what were your improvements this year? Did you meet all your goals? And people that haven't don't want to hear that. They probably have their hands over their ears, because it's like, don't shame me. Don't shame me. I'm not ready yet.
Yeah, I tend to I'm not a big holiday person like that, right? Because I feel very strongly that we should be treating people this way all day. So like, that kind of whole thing. And showing people that we appreciate them, using a combination of love languages throughout the year. So certainly ritual and celebration is important. I love doing that. I just don't feel like it should be all crammed into one month and all, like that. And I also feel that the whole first of the year thing, coming, like I said, from that Jewish culture, the fall is really more the start. That's the Jewish New Year, and it feels that's more of a thing for me that I found that I just noticed year after year. It wasn't something that I even set intention about, and I still don't. I kind of just go with the flow. But to me, anytime, right, whatever energies are out there, I call it evidence-based woo to talk about some of this stuff, and it really is based in science, right? So phases of the moon, they're tides, they rule the tides, and our phase of the moon is that every time there is a full moon, right, and it's going to start diminishing, that is a great time to set an intention to rid yourself of what you do not need. It could be that, or it could be very specific. And then here we come right along the cycle, as a new moon is a great time to set that intention and that energy to grow and fill in whatever it is that we need.
That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you want to change a habit, I was told if you want to change a habit, it takes 28 days. So that fits right in what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what you learn in that process, right? Then you can bring that to the next cycle.
Okay. Well, then lighten it up a little.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite movies or holiday movies or anything in particular? Do you have time to watch movies?
Oh yeah, that's kind of my go-to like brain release are like really good movies and TV shows, things that are well written, that are substantive. And then my favorite are things that are witty, right? If it's like deep and witty at the same time, that's my favorite. So I'm actually right now rewatching Desperate Housewives, and
Wow.
yeah,
I watched the original when it was on regular TV. We've come along then, and you can watch the whole thing in over the weekend.
Well, yeah, eight seasons has kept me going. But so I like things like that. Probably one of my favorite movies of all time is sort of old now, but it's A Fish Called Wanda.
I've seen it.
It still makes me laugh.
Kevin Kline.
What's that?
Kevin Kline is in that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, things like that. And I love like a lot of the things that are on now. there's so much out there that I really, really enjoy. So yeah, it definitely, and I like to read. That takes me out of.
Okay, well, that was my next question. What kind of books could you recommend to people? Do you have any favorites?
I read like a lot of sort of like thrillers with like a strong female detective character. So a lot of Patricia
Nancy
Cornwell.
Drew?
I was a huge Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys fan growing up.
Or
Absolutely.
Agatha Christie, she was really in the lead, but she wrote all those books. But
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. I've seen a lot of those movies based on her books. I haven't read a lot of that. I've read some Sherlock Holmes. But I like that. And I do like, I have a whole bunch of nonfiction, right? Of, you know, help and, all these things that give us more information about ourselves and where we can grow. So those I read a little bit slower, like little bits at a time, or I use them as reference. Because I'm not somebody who can just sit down and read those kinds of things. I need to get carried in the story. So historical fiction is also one of my favorites because I love knowing that those details are accurate. But who knows what somebody said to somebody else in 17.
right.
So just make it up, and that's
Same
cool.
as the Bible.
Don't
Okay,
get me started.
no, I won't. I find the self-help stuff is for me best listened to while I'm driving. Because it's soothing, it's calming, you're on the road, you can pay attention and you can learn something.
Yep.
To me, anything you go to, like a webinar or, somebody's holding a book, a webinar, a movie. Okay, to me, if you get one thing out of that, it's worth it. You just take that one thing and you apply it to yourself. You say, I can do that. It fits me, and it'll make me a better person.
Yeah.
So anyway, is there anything else we haven't covered that you might want to talk about before we end up saying goodbye?
I can tell stories all day long. And,
Yeah, so could I.
dog and pony show, right? But no, I think it's pretty thorough.
All right.
Conversation, very much.
Well, then just tell our viewers where they can find information about you and your services.
Wonderful. Yeah, so I'm a bit of a dinosaur, so I'm on Facebook. I'm on IG a little bit as Moving Forward Wellness, or as Coach Kitty SFL for South Florida, Coach Kitty SFL, or Moving Forward Wellness on Instagram. My big home, like I said, is Facebook, and I have a group, and it's called Shedding Shit and Planting Seeds. And so we talk about, very authentic ways of looking at spirituality. And like you said, peeling that onion, peeling those layers, right? Or as they say in Shrek, parfait. Parfait has layers. I love those kinds of movies a lot too, right? I love animation that's really clever and smart and funny. So I digress. Website, movingforwardwellness.org.
Okay.
That's the website, movingforwardwellness.org. And then I also have a business page, and it's you can find me in Facebook under Moving Forward with Coach Kitty. So
the main thing to do is to go to the Facebook page, and then you'll lead them to all the other places. Yes. I'm sure you have links on them. Great, great. Okay, well, this has been a very exciting episode.
Thank you.
This has been a joy to experience, and thank you to Kitty for joining us today. We'd like to invite you back for a future interview as well. With that said, this is Joseph James with the Joseph James Show. Be sure to follow us, and we will see you in the next episode.